Hi, Ashley here, and welcome to my messy life. If you're new here, hi, my name is Ashley. I'm a stay-at-home mom of 5, a wife, and a senior at a university in the state of Florida, majoring in criminology. My channel is kind of a mixed bag. I've got lots of different videos here, ranging from product reviews, cooking videos, story times. Now I have true crime videos, just random things I see in my everyday life. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for subscribing to my channel, and thank you for coming back. It means a lot. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. Today we will be covering the case of Christine Falling. At the time of her crimes, she was known as the youngest female serial killer on record. Since then, there are a couple of younger ones. She has been up for parole every 7 years since the year 2007. This woman is a serial killer and she needs to spend the rest of her life in jail. That's part of the reason why I was drawn to this case. Because if this case isn't talked about, one day, because of her young age, when she goes up for parole, there might not be anybody around who remembers the crimes that she committed and fully understands the impact that these crimes had on the families that were affected. This case is a real case. It affected real families and real communities, and people are still suffering due to what this serial killer did to their family members. I'm going to be very respectful during this case, and there are members of a certain family that don't want their family member's nickname or name mentioned, and I'm definitely going to abide by that. I've also seen other people from other families that have commented on other videos, and they seem to be okay with their family members being talked about in reference to the case, and so I'm really only going to be removing one family's name from the case. The information is very public, and so if you want to look it up yourself, go ahead and do it. I hadn't heard about this case until recently, but this woman did have numerous red flags that she was going to have issues later on in life and possibly be a killer or a serial killer, including her treatment of animals. She was very abusive, mostly to cats. She suffered from epilepsy, and this epilepsy went untreated in her earlier childhood. She was put up for adoption by her biological family because they were unable to care for her and her older sister due to impoverished circumstances, and I'm sure that didn't help the way that her life turned out. She also ended up in a children's home at one point, so there was just a lot. An early marriage, and I'm not saying that everybody who has these circumstances in their life has a free pass to be a serial killer by any means, but just looking at the patterns and the instability of her childhood, I can see some similarities that I've seen in other cases. Now let's get into the case. Christine Falling was born March 12th of 1963 as Christine Laverne Slaughter in Perry, Florida, to a 16-year-old mother, Anne, and a 65-year-old father, Thomas Slaughter. Thomas was injured at work and became unable to work, and therefore he was unable to support his family. Christine and her older sister, Carol, who was 1.5 years older than her, were put up for adoption due to the impoverished circumstances of their family. They were adopted by the Falling family. Within a year, Christine and her sister found themselves in a children's home due to fights and incompatibility with their adoptive family. By the age of 12, Falling left the children's home, and it was said at one point that she went back to be with her mother, Anne, for a time. At the age of 14, she was married to a man that was 10 years older than her. Christine suffered from epilepsy and learning issues and was never able to rise academically above a 6th grade education. There were definitely warning signs with Christine Falling. According to multiple sources, she used to test cats' 9 lives by throwing them from very high heights. According to the same source, she would strangle them to show her love for them. She married at age 14 to a man in his 20s. This man apparently got more than he bargained for in Christine and perhaps her and him. The marriage did not last for long, about 6 weeks, according to multiple sources. And also multiple sources have stated that there was violence on both sides. According to multiple sources, after her divorce, she began to show a lot of symptoms of hypochondria. She visited the doctor and the hospital frequently with a lack of diagnosable symptoms. It has been said that she went to the hospital over 52 times following her divorce in that time period. She went in for symptoms ranging between bleeding and hallucinations. Some people think that she may have had Munchausen syndrome that turned into Munchausen's by proxy, and I'll get into that a little bit more later on in the video. Christine had a tumultuous childhood, which may have lent itself to her violent nature. However, there are plenty of people who had a tumultuous childhood who did not turn out to be a serial killer. And I'm not excusing her actions as a serial killer by saying that she had a tumultuous childhood. It's just something to note because it is something that sometimes people blame violent behavior on. Following her divorce, Christine began to earn money by babysitting. When she was 17 years old, people began to notice that the children who were under Christine's care were dying at an alarming rate. The first known case took place on February 25th of 1980. This child became unresponsive under Christine's care, and the child passed away on February 28th of 1980. The child was taken to the doctor. It was thought that the child had encephalitis, but it was later discovered during the child's autopsy that the child had died from a severe skull injury. Christine was questioned in this case, and the doctor was very suspicious and wanted the police to investigate further and actually wrote a note to be placed with the police in the case file. However, this note was lost. After the first case, Christine moved to Lakeland, where she took her next 2 victims. These 2 babies were cousins, and their names were Jeffrey Davis, age 4, and his cousin Joseph Spring, age 2. Just 2 months after her move to Lakeland, where she also made her living by babysitting, little Jeffrey stopped breathing in her care. Jeffrey's autopsy revealed that he had a case of myocarditis due to a viral infection that he had, but it was noted on the autopsy that the examiner did not think that this was the cause of his death. While Jeffrey's family was attending his funeral, Christine was babysitting his cousin Joseph Spring. Little Joseph passed away at age 2 while napping in his crib under Christine's care. This boy also had a viral infection, and notes were made of that. Following the death of the 2 boys, Christine moved back to Perry, Florida. She decided that she would try her hand at housekeeping. In July of 1981, 77-year-old Wilbur Swindle died on his kitchen floor the first day that Christine began working for him as a housekeeper. There was no suspicion that fell upon Falling, but she did later admit to being responsible for his death. Shortly after the death of Swindle, Falling was accompanying her step or half-sister. I'm not sure which. There's a lot of different conflicting facts in this case, unfortunately. A lot of sources are saying a lot of different things, so I'm just gonna go with this was her step or half-sister. Either way, the child was her niece. So she accompanied her stepsister to take her niece to get her vaccinations, and then her step or half-sister wanted to run into the store, and she left the child in Christine's care while she ran into the store, and when the mother returned, the child had passed away. It was said that the child died of sudden infant death syndrome. On July 2nd, 1982, the death of another child would finally lead to Christine being held accountable for her actions. The child's name was Travis Coleman, and he was 2 months old. it was found that he died of internal ruptures due to suffocation. So she ended up admitting to the murders while she was in a psychiatric ward. I believe she checked herself in on July 12th of 1982, and on July 20th of 1982 is when she made the confessions that led to her arrest. She stated that she had killed the babies by smotheration. She said she'd heard voices instructing her to do so, and that she had covered their faces with a blanket in response to these disembodied voices chanting and instructing her to do so. Christine was found to have mental illness, but competent to stand trial. She first pled innocent. At this point, I'm going to read to you from a screen capture of an archived article that I found from Christine Falling's innocence pleading in 1982. Blountstown, Florida babysitter Christine Falling pleaded innocent today to first-degree murder charges in the deaths of 2 of 5 children who died in her care. Circuit Court Judge W.L. Bailey set a trial date for the week of November 8th. Miss Falling, 19, showed no emotion during the late morning hearing. Her attorney, Baya Harrison, entered the plea for her. She was charged in the deaths of Travis Dwayne Coleman, age 2, and her first victim, who I will not be naming in this video. The Coleman child died July 2nd of 1982, and her first victim passed away February 28th of 1980. Miss Falling was arrested last month and has been held without bond since then at the Calhoun County Jail. The death of her first victim, which was originally diagnosed as encephalitis, was the first in a series of 5 deaths among children for whom Miss Falling cared. No charges have been filed in the other 3 deaths. Lakeland prosecutor Killian Yancey said Thursday he did not have enough evidence to prosecute Miss Falling in the deaths of the 2 children there in February of 1981. State Attorney Jerry Blair said he is still trying to decide whether to file charges in the death of an 8-month-old girl in Perry in July of 1981. The Coleman infant's death was the first not attributed to natural causes. Mrs. Falling's attorneys are expected to ask Judge W.L. Bailey to close to the press and public a pretrial deposition concerning an alleged confession Miss Falling made while undergoing psychiatric treatment prior to her arrest. They indicated that they will also ask Bailey to dismiss Miss Falling's indictment on the grounds that it is vague and indefinite and fails to state the cause of death of either victim. Bailey has already issued a gag order prohibiting those directly involved in the case from talking to reporters. The Falling case has attracted nationwide attention, prompted investigations by medical examiners from Panama City to Fort Lauderdale, and spurred the creation of a statewide task force to look for links in the cases. Miss Falling, an overweight epileptic high school dropout, claimed the deaths were some weird coincidence. Can we just take a minute to talk about how they just described her in this article? I mean, the 1980s doesn't even seem like that long ago, but can you imagine in 2022 somebody describing anyone, even if it's a serial killer, as an overweight, epileptic high school dropout? It just, nobody would get away with that these days. The 80s were such a different time period. Okay, done. Following her innocent plea, she ended up pleading guilty, and she was found guilty or adjudicated guilty at that point, and she was sentenced to life. She is or was and is eligible for parole after serving 25 years. The first time she was up for parole was in 2007. She had another parole hearing in 2017, I believe. I'm not sure why it was 2017 from 2007, because from what I read, she's up for parole every 7 years. So I don't know what the delay was or why it was later than 7 years. Maybe somebody can explain that to me. But each time she's been up for parole, she has been denied parole. And I'll also read you an article about one of her parole hearings. But first, let me read to you the article about the day that she was found guilty. I will be reading from screenshots of this archived digitized article, and then I will start reading from the video that I recorded. once I get past the parts that I had to black out. Christine Falling pled guilty today to charges of murdering 3 children in her care and was sentenced to life in prison. She'll be eligible for parole in 25 years. Had the 19-year-old defendant gone to trial and been found guilty, she could have been sentenced to death in the electric chair. Miss Falling, who dropped out of junior high school, was given 3 concurrent life sentences for strangling and or suffocating her first victim in February of 1980, and then 8-month-old Jennifer Yvonne Daniels of Perry in 1981, and 2-month-old Travis Coleman of Blountstown in July of 1982. In exchange for the guilty pleas, the state agreed not to prosecute Miss Falling in the deaths in 1981 of 2 Lakeland boys she had been hired to look after, or in the death in January of this year of an elderly Perry man, offer we could not refuse. The bottom line is the state made us an offer that we could not refuse, said Bia Harrison, one of Miss Falling's lawyers. Christine was facing 6 potential death sentences. In the farming community of Blountstown this morning, Miss Falling pled guilty to the 2 murder counts. She was then driven 100 miles southeast to Perry, another rural Florida county seat, where she pled guilty to the 3rd count. Miss Falling earlier pled not guilty to all 3 charges. Miss Falling declined to comment today on the change in her plea, but prosecutors played the woman's confession taped in July 20th at a Tallahassee psychiatric unit. An officer asked her what happened to her first victim. This was her reply. Well, it was about, I'd say, 8:30. She got kind of rowdy or something. Anyway, I choked her until she quit breathing, and then she turned purple. Her heart had stopped beating, and her pulse had stopped. She wasn't breathing, so I tried to get her back to breathing, and I couldn't. So I went and called the sheriff department, and they come out there, and then they called the ambulance to come out there, and then they took her to the hospital and transferred her to Tallahassee. Her first victim died 3 days later in Tallahassee Hospital. Doctors thought she had encephalitis and inflammation of the brain. 3 weeks before Miss Falling's arrest, Travis Coleman was found dead in the trailer Miss Falling shared with her boyfriend, Robert Johnson. The infant had become the 5th child in 2.5 years to die in Miss Falling's care. His death brought a new round of publicity about Miss Falling and renewed speculation about a link to the first 4 deaths, which had been attributed to natural causes. Miss Falling had told reporters that she was a confused victim of grim circumstance. On July 13th, she voluntarily entered a psychiatric unit in Tallahassee after a psychiatrist said she was suicidal. She was released a week later and placed under arrest and held without bond. News. Killer babysitter turned down for parole. Christine Falling to receive another hearing in 7 years. Published November 29th of 2017 at 6:29 p.m. Tallahassee, Florida. A woman dubbed the killer babysitter was turned down for parole on Wednesday. Her murders of 5 children more than 2 decades ago had parents everywhere questioning whether it was safe to leave their kids with a sitter. Christine Falling was 19 years old when she pleaded guilty to killing 3 children, and in exchange, the state did not pursue charges involving 2 other kids who died in her care, and it did not seek the death penalty. The charges may have never been filed if Falling hadn't confessed. I choked her till she quit breathing, and she turned purple, Falling said in December of 1982. As a child, Falling reportedly strangled or dropped cats from high places to test their 9 lives. Her stepfather, who adopted her at age 4, was bewildered. Because she was a lover of children, stepdad Jesse Falling said in 1982, I still say that. Christine Falling also later confessed to killing a 70-year-old man on her first day working as his housekeeper. By law, Falling remains eligible for parole, but prosecutors told the review panel that the so-called babysitter from hell deserved no mercy. This woman killed 5 babies from ages 2 to 4 months old, Assistant State Attorney Joy Powell said. She said she just did it the way she saw it on TV. She says she doesn't know why she did it. Sometimes they cried and they made her mad. One time she just felt the urge. No one showed up to speak on Falling's behalf, and the panel showed no mercy. Falling's presumptive release date is in 2254, long after she dies. Falling will receive another hearing in 7 years. Until the final death, the first 4 children who passed away, as well as the 70-year-old man, were all thought to have died of natural causes. According to the website Morbid and Macabre, some experts believe that Falling was suffering from Munchausen's by proxy. I will put the definition in this video. According to the Mayo Clinic, Munchausen's and Munchausen's by proxy is now called factitious disorder. Factitious disorder is a serious mental disorder in which someone deceives others by appearing sick, by purposely getting sick, or by self-injury. Factitious disorder also can happen when family members or caregivers falsely present others, such as children, as being ill, injured, or impaired. Factitious disorder symptoms can range from mild, slight exaggeration of symptoms, to severe, previously called Munchausen syndrome. The person may make up symptoms or even tamper with medical tests to convince others that treatment such as high-risk surgery is needed. Factitious disorder is not the same as inventing medical problems for practical benefit, such as getting out of work or winning a lawsuit. Although people with factitious disorder know that they are causing their symptoms or illnesses, they may not recognize the reasons for their behaviors or recognize themselves as having a problem. Factitious disorder is challenging to identify and hard to treat. However, medical and psychiatric help are critical for preventing serious injury and even death caused by self-harm, typical of this disorder. Factitious disorder imposed on another. Factitious disorder imposed on another, previously called Munchausen syndrome by proxy, is when someone falsely claims that another person has physical or psychological signs or symptoms of illness or causes injury or disease in another person with the intention of deceiving others. People with this disorder present another person as sick, injured, or having problems functioning, claiming that medical attention is needed. Usually this involves a parent harming a child. This form of abuse can put a child in serious danger of injury or unnecessary medical care. In this case, there were a couple of other instances where a child became ill and was rushed to the hospital following being under Christine's care. And there isn't really a lot of information about this. The children ended up going to the hospital and being held for a few days, and they ended up making a full recovery. There really, as I said, isn't a lot of details, but I just thought it was interesting to note that there were a few cases where children were under her care and ended up recovering. Due to her prior behavior of having hypochondria and possibly having Munchausen syndrome, it kind of makes sense just because she seemed to display a lot of attention-seeking behavior. I'm not by any means saying that people who are hypochondriacs are all suffering from Munchausen syndrome, and I'm not saying that people who suffer from Munchausen syndrome end up suffering from Munchausen's by proxy, but it just makes sense to me that this is a possibility. I did look for other information regarding this particular idea by supposed experts, and I was unable to find anything else, so I will not really go much further into it. But to me, it was interesting. It was an interesting thought, and I felt like it was worthy of including it in the video. And as with all of the other things that I've talked about in this video, I will include the source of the Morbid and Macabre website in the description box of this video. In conclusion, I would just like to say that I really hope that this woman never gets out of prison. I think she would always be a danger to others because there are always going to be children. The crimes that she committed affected at least 5 families that we know of. That's 5 people that never got to live their full lives. 5 families that will never be the same. 4 of her victims were children. There is so much unknown potential that is lost when a child passes away. Those children could have been anything. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for sticking around. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you've heard of this case. Let me know if you have any factually accurate details that I left out. As I said earlier in the video, there were a lot of conflicting details in a lot of the articles that I found. Actually, even one of them that I read said that the gentleman that passed away under her care was 70 years old, and I've read everywhere else that he's 77. So I've got 5 strikes against that 70-year-old fact that's in the one article from recently, the 2017 parole article. But for some reason, facts seem to get lost over time, which I suppose makes sense. It's been a really long time since this whole thing occurred. But
thank you so much for sticking around until the end. And until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay kind, and live your best life.